July 7th, 1968, at Wells Restaurant in Harlem. Bumpy Johnson suffered a heart attack and fell during his morning meal. He was 62 at the time. 3 days afterward, his burial service attracted crowds in the thousands. Politicians, jazz performers, neighborhood figures, and lurking in the rear, eager to stay out of sight, stood Frank Lucas. Frank had vanished from Harlem for 3 full years, leading most to believe he was gone for good. Yet there he appeared, holding back until the others had offered their tributes. Finally, he approached the coffin, dropped to his knees, and murmured words no one else caught. A confession to the deceased for an incident from 1965. An event so shattering that Frank Lucas, destined to forge a heroin syndicate pulling in $1 million daily, carried its weight forever. It drove him to flee Harlem for those 3 years, returning solely when he was certain Bumpy Johnson could no longer exact revenge. This tale reveals what Bumpy inflicted on Frank Lucas, the harsh lesson that even a bold American outlaw dreaded revealing. To grasp those hushed words at the service, rewind 3 years to 1965, the instant Frank Lucas committed his gravest error. Born in North Carolina back in 1930, Frank arrived in Harlem at age 16 in 1946. Armed only with drive and fury, he climbed the ladder steadily, handling numbers games, offering protection, enforcing with brute force. Into the early 1960s, he earned a solid income, yet solid fell short for him. Frank craved wealth. He sought dominance. He yearned to matter. In 1964, Frank traveled to Vietnam, not fighting, but dealing. He spotted a chance others overlooked. The conflict had forged a narcotics route from Southeast Asia to the U.S., dominated by the Italian syndicate. They sourced heroin from Golden Triangle vendors, diluted it repeatedly, and reaped enormous gains. Frank wondered, why rely on intermediaries? Why not deal direct with producers? He forged ties in Thailand, bargained straight with providers, and orchestrated shipments of uncut heroin hidden in caskets of fallen U.S. troops back home. It was audacious, merciless, and primed to shower him with riches. Returning to Harlem early in 1965, Frank prepared to upend the narcotics trade. His supply was the cleanest in New York. He could slash rates below the Italian crews while still banking vast sums. Snorts, he'd selected his spot, 116th Street, smack in Harlem's core. But one obstacle loomed: Bumpy Johnson. At 59 in 1965, Bumpy had ruled Harlem for 2 decades. He oversaw the numbers, managed extortion schemes, mediated conflicts, and above all enforced a rigid policy. No heavy narcotics in Harlem. Bumpy had witnessed heroin's toll on societies. He'd observed it shatter households in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia. He'd seen youth become junkies, parents grieve lost offspring, districts crumble internally, and he'd vowed to shield Harlem, not on his watch, not in his domain. Every operator in Harlem honored that code. The Italian outfit abided by it. They peddled heroin across the rest of New York, just not in Bumpy's zone. Street vendors understood. Cops even acknowledged it. To thrive in Harlem, you adhered to Bumpy's code. But Frank Lucas ignored codes. He chased profits. Frank launched his venture discreetly. No fanfare, no promotion. He simply distributed via a crew of eager young runners willing to gamble. In just 2 weeks, Frank raked in $50,000 weekly. Back in 1965, that sum was staggering. He peddled unadulterated heroin, dubbing it blue magic, at rates that ridiculed the diluted stuff from the Italians. Patrons flocked from across the city, and rumors flew swiftly. It required precisely 12 days for word to reach Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy refrained from bursting in armed or issuing violent threats. He chose a far more chilling approach. He summoned Frank for a meal. They gathered at Wells' restaurant, the very site of Bumpy's eventual passing 3 years on. A Tuesday midday, subdued, solely the pair at an out-of-way table. Bumpy requested breakfast dishes despite the 2 p.m. hour. Frank opted for coffee, appetite stifled by anxiety. "Word is you've been active," Bumpy remarked, slicing his eggs. Frank aimed for nonchalance. "Just hustling to get by, Mr. Johnson." "Earning a buck is okay, Frank, I get that, but you're pushing heroin along 116th Street in my area. It's solid enterprise," Frank replied. "Demand's there. I'm supplying what's needed." Bumpy laid aside his utensil. His tone remained even, yet his gaze shifted ominously. "Frank, heed this counsel. I'm stating it. But once. Cease peddling that toxin in Harlem. Shift your dealings to Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, anywhere but here." "With respect, Mr. Johnson, that's outdated thinking. This represents progress. This is your initial caution," Bumpy cut in. "I'm extending it due to regard for appreciate the effort you've put in. You're a clever young man. Don't force me to issue another caution." Frank really ought to have heeded the advice. Pretty much any guy from Harlem would have. Yet Frank Lucas, at 35 years of age, was raking in cash beyond his wildest dreams, utterly persuaded that he outsmarted the lot. He continued his dealings. 14 days passed before Bumpy reached out to Frank once more. Identical eatery, identical spot. This round, though, Bumpy dropped the courtesy. "I warned you to quit. Mr. Johnson, I'm listening. I hold you in high regard. But this is just commerce. No one's getting harmed. Folks will snag narcotics regardless of whether it's me or another supplier. At the very least, the funds stay circulating locally." That final remark proved unwise. Bumpy's face grew rigid. "Circulating funds locally," Bumpy echoed deliberately. "Frank, are you aware of heroin's toll? It inflicts more than pain on the user alone. It shatters households. It transforms moms into fiends, unable to nurture their kids. It morphs promising youths into burglars and murderers. It guts districts from within. That's hardly sustaining the area. That's torching it all for gain." "It's their decision," Frank countered. "I'm not twisting arms. You're peddling toxin to the uninformed masses. And right here in my turf?" "Your turf?" Frank's tone sharpened. "With due deference, Mr. Johnson, Harlem isn't your property. Things are shifting. The outdated codes." "Those codes," Bumpy murmured softly, "are precisely why you're still alive at this moment." Frank eased back into his seat. "Is that meant as intimidation?" "Not at all, Frank. Consider it your final notice. Halt immediately, or you'll wish you had." Frank Lucas exited the diner convinced Bumpy Johnson was done for, too aged, too lenient, too mired in yesterday to grasp the evolving rules of the trade. Frank returned to 116th Street and expanded his setup twofold. Bumpy Johnson avoided pointless brutality. He favored accuracy, pinpointing the right spots to exert force and topple an entire setup. Frank Lucas's enterprise hinged on vital components: sources, shipping routes, sellers, security, and above all, reliability. Lose even one, and the operation crumbled. Bumpy resolved to eliminate them all. It kicked off on a Monday dawn. Frank's primary heroin source from Thailand went by Chen Lee. Chen's boy was enrolled at Columbia University in New York. The kid suffered from a betting addiction. He was in debt to various wagering outfits, ones under Bumpy Johnson's payroll. Bumpy placed a single call. In under a day, the son's betting obligations vanished, wiped clean as a gesture, paired with a note. Bumpy Johnson looks kindly on your kin. Upon learning this, Chen Li caught on fast. It was a subtle alert, masked as generosity. Bumpy signaled, "Your loved ones are within my grasp whenever I choose. I can aid or harm them. Pick your path carefully." Chen Li ceased answering Frank's summons. Tuesday brought the logistics snag under Bumpy's control. Frank trafficked heroin inside caskets of fallen troops repatriated from Vietnam. A cunning, ruthless ploy. Yet it demanded alliances with many. Army brass, funeral staff, border inspectors, all greased with payoffs. Bumpy skipped out bidding or coercion. He simply ensured they grasped a basic truth. The FBI had eyes on Frank Lucas, not probing deeply as yet, merely observing, and ties to his venture would link anyone to a government probe. Bumpy counted an insider at the agency, Agent Turner, a Harlem native. Turner shared no secrets. He merely posed offhand inquiries. Heard of Frank Lucas? His name's floating around. That sufficed. The Army folks, funeral handlers, inspectors, they all backed off. The danger outweighed the rewards now. Come Wednesday, Frank found no way to import goods. Thursday saw Bumpy dismantle Frank's sales chain. Frank's vendors were ambitious youngsters driven by profit over allegiance to him. Bumpy dispatched his crew for chats with every seller. No ultimatums, merely facts. Aware that Frank's source vanished, the authorities are inquiring about him. Frank won't shield you once it crumbles. A few bailed right away. Others resisted briefly, but spotting peers depart, they joined the exodus. In just 2 days, not one remained to push for Frank. Friday marked the cash drain's onset. Frank maintained hidden spots across Harlem, flats stocked with bills, goods, firearms. He'd been cautious. Only inner circle allies knew the sites. But Bumpy had connections. He knew property owners, maintenance heads, watchful locals, and the art of probing indirectly. Bumpy's team skipped raiding Frank's caches, no forced entries. Unnecessary. They simply arranged, ensured that the key details reached the appropriate authorities. Details on lease breaches, fire safety violations, and odd behaviors warranting a closer look. In just 7 days, law enforcement swept through 3 of Frank's spots. It wasn't a personal vendetta against Frank. Rather, anonymous reports compelled them to move. The money and narcotics were seized as proof. Frank couldn't reclaim any of it without damning himself further. Come the next Monday, precisely 1 week since Bumpy kicked things off, Frank Lucas's whole network had evaporated. Suppliers vanished, transport lines cut, distributors gone, funds depleted, safeguards nullified, and Bumpy Johnson hadn't squeezed off a round, landed a blow, or issued a blatant ultimatum. Frank Lucas found himself in his flat that Tuesday morning, fixated on the silent telephone. His contacts weren't picking up. His Thai connection had ghosted. His sellers had scattered. His storage sites stood barren. He had $3,000 tucked away. 7 days prior, he'd been flush with hundreds of grand. Now, it barely covered a Greyhound fare. A rap echoed at his entrance. Frank snatched the pistol from beside his bed, edged forward warily. "Who's there?" "Delivery," came the reply. Frank swung the door wide. A teenager, around 16, lingered with a sealed packet. "For you, Mr. Lucas." Frank accepted it. Within lay a lone sheet, bearing a crisp, scripted line. "You're alive for now. That's your sole heads up. Get out." Unsigned. Yet Frank recognized the sender instantly. That evening, Frank Lucas stuffed a duffel, climbed into his ride, and headed southward. He shared no destination with anyone, no farewells exchanged. He simply departed. He wound up in North Carolina, returning to his origins. He kept a low profile, took on sporadic gigs, and puzzled over the downfall. How did Bumpy Johnson dismantle it all without a face-to-face clash? How could a relic with antiquated views topple a slick narcotics setup in under a week? It required 3 years for Frank to grasp it. Bumpy triumphed not via greater brutality. He prevailed by comprehending what Frank overlooked. Influence isn't derived from dominance, it's rooted in your ties. And Bumpy Johnson linked to every corner and figure in Harlem. Frank Lucas steered clear of Harlem for 3 years. Bits of word filtered in now and then. Bumpy maintained control. The area remained steady. No opioid plague, as in other urban hubs. Bumpy's governance endured. Then, on July 7, 1968, a call arrived. Bumpy Johnson had passed. Frank motored north from North Carolina for the service. He lingered at the rear, observing scores honor a leader who'd governed Harlem via esteem and savvy, not terror. As the gathering dispersed, Frank approached the coffin. He gazed at Bumpy's serene features and reflected on that meal at Wells, the cautions he'd dismissed, the insight he'd absorbed. Frank dropped to one knee and murmured, "Forgive me, you were correct. I was the idiot." No one else caught it, but Frank had to voice it. Following Bumpy's passing, Frank Lucas returned to Harlem. He reconstructed his narcotics domain, rose as a top-tier trafficker across America, amassed fortunes, yet he always recalled Bumpy's guidance. He avoided peddling near schools, shunned youth as targets, adhered to some ethics, a modicum of boundaries. Upon his 1975 capture, while incarcerated and mulling his path, he confided to his attorney a striking truth. The sole figure I genuinely dreaded was Bumpy Johnson, not for his deeds, but his methods. He could dismantle you before you sensed the storm. That's the core teaching Bumpy Johnson imparted to Frank Lucas back in 1965. Authority isn't rooted in aggression. It's mastering the framework so thoroughly you can dismantle it component by component, stealthily, effectively, leaving folks oblivious until the end game. Frank Lucas gained notoriety. Volumes chronicled him. Films portrayed him. But the tale they omitted was the whisper at that burial. The account of Bumpy Johnson forcing him into 3 years of exile, armed solely with intellect, networks, and one unwavering tenet: keep Harlem clean of poison. Hey, if this narrative revealed power's cunning angle, the calculated edge, smash that like. Sign up for more Bumpy Johnson tales if you're hooked. We've got loads ready. Share your thoughts below. Did Bumpy justify ousting Frank from Harlem, or ought he have allowed the business? And don't forget the alert chime, since next week's drop covers Bumpy striding into a 5-family summit without a weapon and emerging unscathed. You won't skip that. Keep in mind, the deadliest presence isn't the noisiest. It's the one who pinpoints the precise string to yank and watch it all come undone.